everybody, it's Diana from Sew in Common. Welcome to this episode of Sew in Common. So happy to have you with me. And this is actually the next video in our Quilt with Me series. Quilt with Me standing for machine embroidery, from piecing in the hoop, which is again what we're going to talk about today, another couple of blocks in that category, all the way through to your finished quilting, which we'll talk about in later videos down the road. But I'm so happy to have you all with me today. I'm so glad that you all are loving this series because, you know, quilting has really, this quilting with our embroidery machine, piecing, and the finished quilting is really shows how quilting, the art of quilting, has moved with the times and moved with the technology. This is what we do today. Who knows what we're going to do in another 10 or 20 years? Who knows how quilting will be done then? And I'm excited to know, but I love that we have this available today because I am what you would call a traditional quilter. I've been quilting for over 5 decades, so all the way back when we were doing things all by hand. And then I moved into using my sewing machine, which many of you may be doing as well. But now we can do it on our embroidery machine. And I'll be honest, I don't do a lot of hand piecing anymore. I do some hand quilting now and again, but I love piecing and quilting on my embroidery machine. It brings like a whole new life and joy to the art of quilting. So I am so glad that you all are with me today. And today we're going to talk about kind of the same block, but two styles of the same block. So the first one we're going to look at is this one. It's called a square in a square. Now, traditionally, a square in a square is not difficult to do, but we're also going to talk about a on point square in a square. So where your center square is on its point. This version gives some traditional quilters a little bit of a headache because you have to kind of cut your things a little bit differently. You got to use some angles and stuff. You don't have to do any of that with piecing with your embroidery machine. I'll also talk to you a little bit today about your templates because I wholeheartedly believe that you should use pre-cut pieces when you piece in the hoop. I just think it makes it so much easier and so much more accurate. Now you can piece, flip, and trim kind of like we do with applique, but I honestly think you're going to love using pieces better, or pre-cut pieces better. Now, you may have a file that you're using for your design that you've purchased. Cool, no problem at all. Or you might be wondering, how do I get these designs? Well, I'm going to actually show you a little piece of software today as well, because it is the option I use to create all of my pieced in the hoop items. And it is called My Block Piecer from Dime. And I'm just going to go right into that really here. Here is the software. Now, to purchase this software, you either have to go to Dime's website, or and I'll show you that address when we go back to the presentation, or you need to attend one of their events that are hosted by can't get that out, so many of all of the beautiful shops throughout the country that are Dime dealers. So you can also go to Dime's website to sign up for them. Those events are completely free. You'll want to look for one called Block Party if you want to attend one of those events. But I want to show you how I do this because I've had some questions. Diana, how do you get your designs? Well, I use a software. And trust me, I was the most software phobic person on the planet. Although I love the idea of computers and what they could do for us. And I was like, always, I'm the Star Trek person. I'm like, gung ho, let's have those tricorders and let's do things on computers. But it scared me because I always thought I was going to mess things up, because when computers came out, it was my generation, the boomer generation, that really started this thing. There were no classes to take really, unless you wanted to learn how to code and things like that. And that really wasn't where I was at. I had to take a class like that in college for my science degree, but it wasn't where I was at. I didn't want to learn all that. I wanted to be able to do stuff without that. So it was a little bit difficult sometimes to learn software. So I was a little phobic about it, but no need with this software that I'm using now because it's all button driven. I'm not digitizing anything. I'm not even doing quilt math. This software will figure out my quilt math for me. So in this software, they have this library. Now, you can also create your own blocks. You don't have to only use I think there's like over 1,200 blocks in here. You don't have to just use these blocks. So there is no, here in the basic, there is no basic block in a block. That first one I showed you, this one right here. That's not in the basics here. But there is they call it a diamond square. Remember, don't care what it's called. Just make it if you love it, right? Because blocks have all kinds of names to them. They've been named and renamed over time, so don't worry about the name. So that regular block in a block isn't there. But when I came down to, oh gosh, I think it's the log cabin and pineapple collection here. This one right here, that's the log cabin square called Courthouse Steps. Really a lovely block. But look, in here in the center, this is really a square and a square and a square, really. So if I just brought this into the software by clicking on it, and I took out these 4 here. There it is. Now, I also went ahead and made these, whoops, I pulled the wrong button, and changed them all to the same color so I could see it. And then you go ahead and you set your size and it gives you your file and all of that. And that's not what I want to show you today, but I just wanted to show you how I was able to find that, because you may already own My Block Piecer. That's the software I'm in. And if you do, I wanted to give you a little bit of a tip there on how you can use some of the blocks already in the system, in the software, to create your own blocks and then create it your own size and all of that. So that's how I did that. It was really quite easy. And then for my on point square and a square, that was just under my basic block collection right there. Shows it. There I went. And I just resized it and all of that. So that software, friends, is a super easy way to make all the different squares that you want to make. Unless your square has a curve or a funky Y seam, you can make it in there. And you can even make blocks with Y seams by breaking them down into individual blocks. That's a topic for another video down the road some ways. So that's a little more not advanced really, but just takes a little more analysis in how you do it. We'll talk about those in another video. But today we're still in our basic series, and I want to talk to you about these 2 little blocks right here, because those are also kind of 2 of the most basic blocks that we use for a lot of our quilt tops. So the first video was the half square triangle and the quarter square triangle. Well, the square and a square and the on point square and a square are 2 more very basic blocks. That's why I want to go over those with us today. Now, remember I told you that we'd talk about templates for a moment. So in that software, you can print out templates for your blocks so that you get your pieces. I put these, I print them out on a product called Print and Stick Target Paper by Dime. And so what they are, they're stickies. I put it on my fabric, I cut it out really easily, and away I go. And this one for the square and a square that I've got right here, I'm just trying to put it back on its backing paper. I've probably made 8 or 10 with just this one set of templates. So this Print and Stick Target paper is very economical because you can reuse it and reuse it and reuse it when you use it. You can also print your templates out on regular paper. If you're going to do that, maybe spray a little temporary adhesive on the back, just like a little really quick, to put on your fabric to hold them down, because if you pin them down, your fabric sometimes will tend to buckle under those pins a little bit. You might not get a piece that's quite the right size. So I always say Print and Stick Target paper is my favorite way to cut out my templates. Or if you own the software, remember you can, and you have a digital cutter, you can do your templates on your digital cutter. But I'm not going to talk about any more specifics about that software today, but I did want to touch on that because someone asked me, how am I getting my pre-cut pieces? And that's how I do it. Really quick and simple. Now, one other thing I wanted to touch base with you on in the last video, which was on stabilizers for piecing in the hoop, we talked about one called Piece and Stitch, which was a soft tear away, wash away hybrid stabilizer. And it was actually this actual block here. And you notice I left a little piece still in here to remind me that that's what I had used to make this. And somebody said, in a question, can I use one of those fabric folding pens? And I love those pens. Now, I don't use the product that comes with it. I just use water. I don't like to use chemicals in my fabric if I don't have to. I mean, like a little light sizing, something like that. Okay, it'll all wash away in the end. But I just use water in my fabric folding pen. However, if you're going to use a tearaway or this soft tearaway, I'm going to dissuade you. I like that fancy word, don't you? Dissuade you from using the fabric folding pen, because if you get the paper stabilizers, any paper stabilizer wet, you're going to weaken it at that point, and it could start to degrade on you while you're still in the stitching process. Okay, so if you're going to use a tearaway or that Piece and Stitch, which is that soft hybrid tearaway wash away, use a little seam roller, finger press, or like I've told you in the past, I love the Clover 2 mini iron, the small triangle. It comes with a bigger triangle and a smaller one. I love the smaller one. So that's how I would do it. That's how I do it with any of my stabilizers. But if you're hooked on the fabric folding pens, like so many of us are, because it's a great product, I don't use it whenever I use a paperback or a paper stabilizer because I don't want to weaken it. Alrighty, so the first thing I want us to do today is to talk about the square in the square. Really easy. Let's look at this for a moment. So we have our square here in the center, and then we have this top piece and this bottom piece and the two side pieces. So you can kind of see how it will come together. We're going to place our center piece, then we'll stitch the top short piece, the bottom short piece, and then each side. So super simple to do that. Let's go ahead and share my screen and go over to our camera now. So here we are, and I've got these lovely fabrics for the one that we're going to stitch out today. This one will be our center, and then I chose, because this has a few colors in it, I chose this kind of a medium lavender purple to use with it because it kind of blends really beautifully with that. So I have my two shorter pieces and my two longer pieces. Now, I know some folks have also asked me, how do I prepare my fabric? I know there are folks out there that like to just soak their fabric wet with either starch or sizing or a stiffening spray and press them dry. My professional opinion, as someone who quilts professionally and repairs vintage quilts, that's a bad idea to wet your fabric completely and dry it. Now with water, I still don't like that idea as much. Water wouldn't be as bad, but any chemicals in here that are then dried are actually, even though they wash away, they are making the fibers of your fabric more brittle. And that fabric will now have a shorter lifespan. And I always look at all of my quilts and all of my projects and think about, you know, what will my great niece think about this, or my great great niece think about this 30, 40 years from now? I want them to have longevity. So I don't use any kind of a stiffening spray or a starch or anything where I soak it. Now, I do use a little bit of light sizing just to kind of press it. So you can see it's still got movement. My pieces still have movement, but it's not truly floppy because there's a little sizing under that, but it's just a little size and a quick press, and then it'll wash away. But the problem with soaking and then pressing dry is having that iron on there a long time with those chemicals. Like I said, it's making those fibers of the fabric more brittle. So that's my advice. That's my tip from me to you. So I've shown you in the past, the first thing you do is you stitch out your map onto your stabilizer. And I will do a video here in the future where we do one with batting in it, because I know I've had some questions. We talked about batting in our last video on stabilizers, but I'll do one so that you guys can see what it's like to actually stitch out on a piece of batting as well as your stabilizer. So hang on for that one. But so here I've already stitched out my map for this one just to save time, because when we go to do the other one, we'll have to stitch that out. Whoops, let me take this back out. So now I want to take and place my center, because right here I'm seeing that my center block is the first one. And remember, the first piece of any in the hoop block is done face up. So your fabric is face up. And I can take a little bit of non-toxic, remember it should be non-toxic or made for fabric glue stick, and put that on the back just to hold it in place there. Because again, the non-toxic means that it's not going to harm your fabric. There's less acid and stuff in it that way, so it doesn't harm it. We give it funny names, but there's always a science around why we do or don't use certain products with our fabric. And you all know me, I am a scientist by education and trade, so I like to give you that little bit of info in case you are curious about it. So let's go ahead now and stitch down this first block. And again, like I've told you in the past, I'm using a light dove gray 40 weight embroidery thread. Now, to talk about thread for a second, because I have mentioned this in the past in other classes. You can piece your in the hoop blocks with a 60 weight, which is a slightly finer embroidery thread. And I say that because if you're going to piece a whole quilt top on your embroidery machine, and then you're going to take that quilt top to your long armor to do the finished quilting, which we'll talk about more in future episodes of this series, some of them like you to use that 60 weight because it works a little better on with their long arm machine. So when you go to do a quilt and you know you're going to have it quilted by a long armor, talk to them first. They very may want you to use that tear away, wash away stabilizer, so their machine isn't working with any kind of a stabilizer problem. And they may want you to use a 60 weight embroidery thread, but talk to your long armor, see what their preference is. So here we have our first piece tacked down, and now it's telling me that I want to do the small piece on top. And remember, all the second and subsequent pieces are laid face down or right sides together. And I'm just kind of getting that in there. And you can always take your hoop off of your machine if you like when you place those, but you get so used to it over time that you really a lot of times don't need to. Now here comes the time where I might use a fabric folding pen. And because I'm using a no-show mesh stabilizer, I could easily use a fabric folding pen here, but I just flip it, and I'm going to take my little seam roller, and I'm going to roll my seam to get a nice little flat seam there. And just to keep it stuck down nice and good, I'm just going to swipe it with a little bit of my glue stick. Now, look at how nice and crisp that seam is. Everything's laying down nice and flat. I'll just slip that right back into my machine, and we'll go ahead and stitch that down. Because as we see right here, that's what it's doing. It's going to stitch that part down. And this whole square, if you're just doing it by yourself, you're not listening to me now, 4 minutes. That's all it takes to stitch this out. Really quick and simple. And this is on I'm running this at 600 stitches per minute. So if you're doing it faster, it could be even a little faster. If you're doing it on a slower speed than that, it might just take a few seconds longer. So I've placed my next piece, and I could have put a little piece of tape back here, a low tack adhesive tape, if I wanted, but I can just hold it there and it'll be fine. I should turn that bell off sometimes so you folks don't have to listen to it. Now I'm just pulling this over. Remember, don't pull hard. Remember, you don't absolutely, let me take this out so you can see it. When you pull it this way, don't tug on it because you don't want to accidentally pull your fabric and skew it because you could be working with a bias edge. But when you bring it up here, if it's a little shy of this stitch line, don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt it because remember, you've got a whole 1/4 inch to play with there. So I'm just finger pressing, giving that a little roll. Now what I would do normally, I'd have my iron in a little pressing mat right here, and I would just press that down really easily. In a future video, I will try to give myself a little bit more room here, and I'll set up my little iron for you and show you how that works. Because I know some of you like to see like all the goodies and how they work, right? To see which one maybe that you want. So in the comments in this video, let me know, have you already tried using a little seam roller? Have you tried using a glue stick? Do you have a favorite glue stick? List that in the comments because I know folks would love to hear from you and some of the things that you like to use as well, because you know we're all quilters regardless of how long we've been quilting. If this is our first block, our millionth block, it doesn't matter. We're all quilters and we all like to share tips and tricks with one another. So now we can see we're going over here to the left side, and I'm just laying this down. Now this one, just make sure that you have a little bit of fabric to each side of your stitched line there, because it's going to look like your piece isn't long enough, but it is. I guess I should say it is if you're using the same pattern that I'm using from the software. If you have your own pattern that you're using, that you've made or that you've purchased, then of course follow the instructions as written so that you get your piece put together properly. I'm just going to take that out and flip that. Give it a little bit of a press. I will tell you, the reason I don't do finger pressing, I know that's hard to see, I'm sorry. The reason I don't do finger pressing, I tend to press too hard and I tend to stretch my fabric. So I try not to finger press. And that's why I don't always use my little seam roller either, because sometimes I get a little overzealous and end up stretching out my fabric. That's why I like that little iron, and it gives such a nice crisp seam there for you and a fold. There we go. Now we just have one more piece to do. See, these blocks, the reason I wanted to do these basic blocks in this series first is one, because it's like I've said, they're the ones we use most often, and I wanted you to see how quickly and easily these stitch out. So I've had a question, does piecing in the hoop take less time than sewing with your sewing machine? Well, I'm going to say maybe not too much, if any, because you're still cutting your fabric, you're still stitching out. But there are a lot of folks that don't like the idea of using 1/4 inch seams. I have a friend, she's a garment sewer. 1/4 inch seams make her a little crazy because in garment sewing we use 5/8 inch seams, which are much bigger. And so doing a 1/4 inch seam makes her a little crazy. They're small for her. So quilting on an embroidery machine where your seams and all are built in to your file, your design file, makes all of that really easy. You don't have to worry about getting your 1/4 inch seams right or getting your points to come together easily, because you're going to get your points perfect every time. So I'm not sure that it takes less time, but if you are not an avid sewer with your sewing machine and you are with your embroidery machine, then this is the way to go. And I find it really fun. And for someone like me who's had carpal tunnel on both hands, surgery, I like doing this because I don't have to stress my hands as much. So if you have a condition with your hands, you'll love this process as well. So here is our block completed. Oops, sorry, I was pressing on my screen. That's why this was kind of moving around. In fact, we'll just close this one out. And so there is our block. Now I'll just take it out of my hoop, and then I would take it over to my cutting table, and I would use my stitch line and cut 1/4 inch all the way around. Now, if you use pre-cut pieces and you cut right on the line of your template, you can cut right on the edge of the fabric. But I'm kind of bad that way. When I do my pre-cut pieces, a lot of times I just kind of loosely cut around them. So I have a little more fabric there than I need. But I just use this stitch line and I place my ruler at the 1/4 inch mark. And then I know that at the edge of the ruler, I can just cut and I'll have that perfect 1/4 inch. So when I go to sew these together, I'm sewing on that stitch line and I know I've got my perfect 1/4 inch every time. So for those of you that get a little phobic about using a 1/4 inch seam, you're going to love this because you don't even have to worry about it. So that is our square in a square, our regular old square in a square. Isn't that pretty? Turned out good. This is our original one that I did in the, here, let's put it in this way so you can actually see the little bees. I did it with the little bees and then the little flower fabric, like they're going out to pollinate all those beautiful flowers. And then that's our purple one with the little hexagon fabric in the center. So now I want us to go through and do an on point square in a square. Because like I said, when you do this traditionally or with a sewing machine, I say traditionally because a lot of people think of sewing machine piecing as the tradition, but really hand piecing is the oldest tradition. But regardless, when I say tradition, typically I'm talking about working with your sewing machine because that's what so many quilters use today. So when you do this with a sewing machine, you have to cut triangles. You have to worry about biased edges here, 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 and here. So doing this in a traditional sense, we'll give you a little rabbit ears there, can be a little challenging for some folks. It just really takes a little practice, but it can be a little challenging. Not so when we do it in the hoop of our embroidery machine. So let me just bring in, I've got a piece of, another piece of my poly mesh or no-show mesh stabilizer that I'm just going to hoop up here and tighten down my little hoops. I'd really loosened it up. It's going to take just a second. There we go. Now it's nice and tight. All right, so now I'm going to place this into my machine, and I'm going to come in here. Oops, wrong category. I'm going to come in here, and I am going to choose my file. It's got to be here. There we are. One more. That's the wrong size. Hang on. I'm just going to size this one down. Let's see. Maybe I have another file in here. I thought this was the one. Sorry, folks. Just need to find the right file. I think it's this one. Yeah, it's this one. I just chose the wrong one. I have a couple of them here, and I didn't look at my size. There we go. All right, so there's my file all ready to go. You can see right here, that is my map that I need to stitch out. So we're going to do that now. So for this fabric, or for this square, I chose this little kind of a lattice grid fabric. Now that's what it would look like if we did it in the traditional square on square like we just made, where it was just a regular square. But because we're going to do this on point, look at how that changes. Isn't that pretty how that's going to change? Now, I will tell you that with this particular square, especially if you're going to use a fabric similar to that one or white or something pale, this is really nice because, okay, you can make this as a square in a full block, a bigger block, but you could also put a monogram in here if you wanted. If this was going to be a label for you, watch the stabilizer video. I show you how to use a fusible no-show mesh to turn this over and fuse it to an item. Perfect way to fuse on a quilt label. So you could actually take with software and put a monogram or a phrase in here with love from and your name and the date, something like that. So these could also make really great little quilting labels. But this is my center fabric that we're going to use. And then I chose a light but slightly darker print for my outside because when I do this, it's going to flip and it's going to look like I've pressed to the dark side. And quilters tend to press their fabrics to the darker fabric so that you don't get shadows of the other fabric through your lighter colors. However, here's a tip for you. If you're using a pattern and it tells you to lay a certain fabric in a certain place, you want to do that because you want to follow that pattern so that it turns out just how they want it. Now I'm going to stop this and cut my thread because this particular file I'm using will also stitch out the numbers for my different pieces so I know what order they go in, but I don't want to stitch those out on here. I tend not to use that function. If you're new to it and your pattern does that, by all means do it because it can be really helpful in showing you where to go next on your piece. But you should also have instructions, printed instructions or computer instructions for that. So I just need to advance to my next block or my next step, and that is to place my center block. But this time, instead of placing it like this, I'm going to place it just like this. Now, I'm going to put a little glue stick on the back and this little non-stick Elmer stick. See, oh, you can see the purple through it. Oh no. The nice thing about that purple, as this dries and kind of goes away, that purple disappears. You won't see that. So I'm going to lay my block right on here. I'm just going to press that down. So there's my center. I've marked. Now I'm off right here. So I'm going to just peel that right back up and replace it. So I want to make sure I've got it in the right place. There we go. So now I'm going to put this into the machine and go ahead and stitch this out. And with our next piece that we lay down, our first corner piece of the outer square, I'm going to talk to you about what happens if you make a goof. Because believe it or not, I make goofs. I do all the time. And so occasionally you might make a goof when you go to flip. And I want you to know that it's easy to take a square out or a piece off and redo it. So here we go. Here is my next piece. It's supposed to go right up here. So I'm going to take my next piece of fabric, and remember, second, third, fourth, all the subsequent pieces go right sides together or right side down. So if I lay my piece just like this, I know that when I flip it, it's going to be right. So now I'm going to flip it over, line it up right there on my edging. Use a piece of low-tack tape if you want to hold it down. Put it right back in and stitch. And see, this particular square, if you look up here, only 3 minutes for this one. So this one goes really fast. It'll take us probably a little bit more because I'm going slowly and showing you step by step, but these really stitch out quickly. Now, let's say that I accidentally stitched that, or when I flip it, oh gosh, it's way down here. Now, if it were right at that edge a little bit, I wouldn't worry about it, but it's way down here, and I know it's not going to get sewn down. Super easy. Let me just back this up one stage because we're going to restitch this one. I just take my little thread snips or a little seam ripper, whatever you have, but I like these little, these are Karen K. Buckley. They're the tiniest ones that are made, and they're very fine pointed. You really can't cut fabric well with these. They're kind of delicate. They're made for your threads, and I just come right under, oh gosh, I know that's hard to see. But let me come in right here. I'm going to make a little, I just come right under here and I just start snipping that thread all the way across. Then I could replace it and restitch it. Now I'm not going to take the whole piece off, but we will go ahead and restitch this down. So it's really easy with a little seam ripper or a little pair of snips to take a section off if you need to because you didn't get it placed quite rightly. And that happens from time to time. I find that happens more when I place fabric and then trim later. That's when I find I get into those troubles for some reason, because you think you might have a big enough piece, you think you might cut in the right place, and sometimes you don't. But with pre-cut pieces, I don't have that problem typically. So I'm just giving a little finger press there, and I'm going to do a little bit of glue stick. Press that down. Now, let's take a look at this. Can you see in my center here? That purple is already gone. The reason you see a little lump there is because I accidentally let it stitch out one of those numbers. So that's what that little lump is. But the purple is already gone from there, because as that dries, that purple just goes away. So it's really nice. That way you can see it. Typical fabric glue sticks tend to be white, and so I can't always see where I put my glue. That's why I like to use these Elmer's ones, and they're super cheap. I get like 12 of them at the beginning of school every year, and I try to make them last for a whole year. Alrighty, so now we have that corner down. Now it's telling me to come over and do the other side. So these come together just so quick and simple. It's kind of like doing a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle. It's also like doing paper piecing without the you don't have to sew it on the back and guess where you've put it and that kind of thing. I'm not a paper piecer. I've tried it. I've done projects with it. I don't care for the process. To me, there's too much worry involved in it, but that's just me. There are so many people that absolutely adore paper piecing. That's fine, no problem at all there. But for me, I don't care to do that the traditional way. But really, this flip and stitch is kind of that idea of paper piecing, but with a lot less of worry and hassle for me anyway. So I've got that piece folded and with a little bit of glue there. Wanted to pop back up. I'm just going to hold it with my thumb there for a moment. There we go. There you go. Now you can see it. Let's see if I can get. I hope my camera didn't just. Okay, my camera just went out. Sorry. Let's come back in. Okay, folks, hang on with me just for a moment, please. My camera went out. I'm going to have to bring it back up. There we go. Not sure what happened there. Gosh, I'm not sure. It's not going to let me. There we go. I'm going to have to reboot it. Technology, that happens, right? So let me just see if I can bring this back up. I should have known better than to try and move it. And I'll choose my camera. Just takes a second. I do apologize. There we go. There we go. Now we're back. So let me come back in and share the screen again with you. There we go. Now we're back. Okay, so now, and I do have it a little closer so that you can see it a little bit better. So now we're going to work on this side. You can't see my screen over here, but it's telling me to do this piece. So I'm just going to bring in my fabric and place it. A lot of times I don't use glue or tape at this stage because the piece really will kind of just stay there on its own. But if you're a little concerned, if you like to be extra careful, not a problem in the world with that, folks. Be as careful as you want to be. But you can always just hold it down or whatever you like. So I'm going to give that a little press, and I am going to do, I do like to use a little, actually take this out, there we go. I do like to use that little bit of glue stick to hold it down, especially now if I'm using that little iron I've been telling you about. A lot of times it stays so nice and flat. I don't have to worry about using glue stick. But if I'm just pressing with my fingers or with a little seam roller, a lot of times I'll back that up with that little bit of glue as well. And look, we've only got one more piece, and then we're done with our on point square in a square. And see how simple this has been? Now, I will tell you, it's not this simple necessarily when you're doing that in a more traditional sense, because of the way you have to cut, the way you have to worry about your bias edges, things like that. And we're going to do one more flip. I'm going to give that a little press with my seam roller. There we go. That's a little bit better. Give my little bit of glue. There we go. And I literally just give a smudge of the glue. You don't need much at all. Please, whatever you do when you use your glue stick, don't like paint your fabric with it. It's really not necessary. And here we are, just one more piece, and we'll be done with this little one as well. So now you know basically the construction and some more tips and tricks on two more of the most basic blocks that we do in quilting. Now again, I used a bigger piece of fabric here. That's why this doesn't look the same. But this is actually my 1/4 inch right there. So when I cut this out, I'll get that nice and even. But there is my beautiful square in a square. There is my original square in a square. See how easy that is to do that? And again, if you want to use something like that, let's go back into our regular screen. If you want to use something like that to make a quilt label, you're going to need a software so you can bring in your lettering, or you might be able to do lettering on your embroidery machine and center it up inside the little square in a square, and go back to the video on Quilt with Me stabilizers, because I'll show you how you can turn that into a quilt label with using a fusible no-show mesh stabilizer. So I hope everyone enjoyed doing the square in a square and the on point square in a square blocks today. There's two more out there in the series, the original basics with the half square triangle and the 1/4 square triangle. And then there is the stabilizer one. And I've got more coming. I'm trying to do a bunch of them throughout the week, and then every week I can release one of them for you, because I want us to get to the point where we're actually making big 18 by 18 inch blocks. Yeah, you don't have a hoop that big, but it's really easy to do. So we're even going to get to the point where we're making those kind of blocks in this series. And then we're also going to talk about finished quilting as well. So folks, leave your comments below. If you need to contact me for a question, you want to do it privately, make sure to contact me at my website, www.sewincommon.com. And I did tell you, if you want to look at those softwares I was telling you about earlier, you can do that here at Inspired by Dime at www.shop.dzgns.com. That's the one right there. And so, as I tell you every time we get together, go sew life beautiful. I can't wait to start seeing some of the beautiful quilts and things that you're going to make. Remember, when you make your pieces and all, and you post your photos, have a little hashtag on there, hashtag sew in common, and that way I can see all the beautiful pieces that you're making. Until next time, everybody, bye for now.